Most astronauts have agreed that once you leave Earth, nothing is ever the same once you return. You're a changed man or woman, for better or worse. But while this transformation was merely psychological for most space voyagers, this idea was all too real for cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev. When he set out on his journey, he thought he knew exactly what Earth would look like on his return. But after an unforeseen shift in power, he began to wonder if he'd ever make it home safely. Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The year was 1991 when three-year-old flight engineer Sergei Krikalev left for the Mir space station from a base in Kazakhstan. In spite of all his training, Krikalev had no way of preparing for the twist his journey was about to take. At the time, the Mir space station needed some heavy maintenance, so Krikalev, the brainy engineer, was assigned to conduct repairs and experimental spacewalks at the station. In the beginning of his trip, he wasn't alone. Cosmonaut Anatoly Artsebarsky and Britain's first astronaut, Helen Sharman, went along with Krikalev for the journey. Both of them, however, wound up leaving Krikalev before disaster struck. See, Krikalev was only supposed to be in space for 5 months, a quick jaunt, more or less. But after a slew of unexpected happenings plagued Earth, his trip became complicated. While he was working on the Mir space station, the Soviet Union, his home country, collapsed and split into 15 separate states on December 26 of 1991. This, of course, spurred dramatic changes. President Mikhail Gorbachev stepped down to make room for Boris Yeltsin, the new leader of the newborn country, Russia. All of this made the status of Krikalev's mission fuzzy, as his home country, the one responsible for his journey, no longer existed. Stuck in space, Sergei Krikalev was amusingly and unhelpfully nicknamed the last citizen of the USSR. But the not-so-funny situation posed the questions how, where, and when was Krikalev to return to Earth? These questions were complicated because the Soviets had launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which went to the new state of Kazakhstan after the collapse of the USSR. These rockets weren't cheap, so Kazakhstan then charged Moscow ridiculously large fees to use the facility, in turn delaying Krikalev's journey home, considering the Russian economy was already deteriorating. At one point, Krikalev had the opportunity to return to Earth on the Raduga re-entry capsule, but since that would have resulted in the abandonment of Mir, Krikalev declined. He was dedicated to looking after the space station until there was an available flight engineer replacement. But that would take money. Russia desperately tried to raise money by selling trips to the space station to other governments. Austria paid $7 million for a spot, and a Japanese television station spent $12 million to send one of its reporters into the cosmos. Still, fundraising fell short. Finally, after Moscow and Kazakhstan negotiated a deal, the first Kazakh astronaut and the Austrian astronaut were launched into space via the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Krikalev was finally going to be relieved. Or so he thought. Sadly, once they arrived at the station, it became clear that neither of them had the skills necessary to replace Krikalev and keep up with the demands of the Mir station. Dedicated, the cosmonaut knew this meant he couldn't leave yet. During this catastrophe, Krikalev's name was plastered all over Russian newspapers, which heavily sympathized with him. The Komsomolskaya Pravda even said that Earth started to forget about its cosmonaut. The situation was serious. With all eyes on the new country, Russia became so frantic to retrieve Krikalev from space that it even considered selling Mir to the United States, but NASA showed little interest in that offer. For Krikalev, the days were starting to add up in a major way with some pretty serious consequences. Unfortunately, boredom wasn't the only risk that came with a lonely, painfully long stay in space. Overstaying your welcome in space makes you susceptible to a boatload of risks, including muscle atrophy, radiation, a dangerously weakened immune system, and even cancer, so Krikalev was in trouble. I wondered if I had the strength to survive to complete the program, a nervous Krikalev confessed when asked about how he felt preparing for his epic space adventure. I was not sure. Soon, his situation looked completely hopeless. Thankfully, after what must have felt like forever, Germany paid $24 million for a ticket for Krikalev's replacement, Klaus-Dietrich Flade. Finally relieved of space station maintenance duty, Sergei Krikalev returned to Earth on the 25th of March 1992. When the victim of space slowly came out of his return capsule, 4 men had to help him stand, as Krikalev hadn't experienced gravity in approximately 10 months, just about 311 days. They draped a fur coat over the brave cosmonaut and gave him a warm bowl of broth. Krikalev's return to Earth became international news. One report even described his initial appearance on March 25th as pale as flour and sweaty, like a lump of wet dough. That seems a bit harsh considering the nightmare that Krikalev endured, especially considering he wasn't done with space just yet. 2 years later, he embarked on another space mission, becoming the first Russian cosmonaut to travel on a NASA shuttle. His bravery and commitment to the final frontier must have been inspired by the fearless cosmonauts that came before him. Of course, the Soviet space program might have been hiding more than a few secrets, according to recent theories. Gagarin became a role model in the USSR after his epic journey to the stars. But that's hardly a surprise given the sheer gravity of his achievement. By making it into orbit, this 7-year-old cosmonaut helped the Soviets to gain an edge over America in the so-called space race. Right from the off, though, some people were unconvinced that Gagarin was the first human to orbit our planet. Rumors circulated claiming someone else had achieved the feat days before him, supposedly entering orbit and returning in poor health. Given the paranoia of the Cold War era, it's no surprise that stories about the space race were met with suspicion. The Soviets did conceal aspects of their program, making it easy for rumors to grow. With so much secrecy, it wasn't hard for people to imagine that certain events or even entire missions might have been hidden. Over the decades, conspiracies surrounding the Soviet space program have persisted. One theory claims the Soviets sent humans into space before Gagarin and that they never came back, but does this idea hold any real weight? Given the dramatic twists in the Soviet program, some think it's possible. The story traces back to the end of World War II, when the USSR and the United States began preparing for Cold War competition. Both nations had captured German rocket technology and were eager to build on it. With German expertise now divided between them, the two superpowers set out to develop competing space programs. What followed was not cooperation, but rivalry. Each side wanted to outdo the other. The space race had officially begun. Early missions relied heavily on animal testing. Both nations sent creatures into space to understand the risks. The first purposeful biological passengers were fruit flies sent by the Americans to study radiation exposure. As ambitions grew, more advanced species were launched. In 1949, the U.S. sent a rhesus macaque named Albert II to space, the first mammal to exit Earth's atmosphere. Sadly, he didn't survive the return trip. The Soviets focused on dogs. In 1951, Saigon and Dezik were launched into space, though their craft didn't reach orbit. Still, both animals survived, marking an important step. By 1957, the race was accelerating. The Soviets launched Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite in orbit, a groundbreaking achievement. A month later came Sputnik 2, carrying Laika, who became the first creature to reach orbit. She did not survive, but her flight proved the feasibility of orbital life support. In 1962, more dogs were successfully sent into orbit and returned alive, a major milestone that paved the way for human spaceflight. On the 12th of April 1961, Yuri Gagarin lifted off aboard Vostok 1 from Baikonur in Kazakhstan. He became the first human to orbit Earth, securing his place in history. While the mission itself was smooth, the landing nearly ended in disaster. A malfunction caused the spacecraft to shake violently during re-entry, but Gagarin survived by ejecting and parachuting to safety. Gagarin's success made him world famous, but it also pushed the U.S. forward. A month later, Alan Shepard became the first American in space. The Soviets continued to break records. Valentina Tereshkova flew in 1963, and Alexei Leonov conducted the first spacewalk in 1965. The USSR even seemed poised to reach the moon first until technical failures and tragedy slowed progress. In 1967, cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov died when a malfunction caused his spacecraft to crash, marking the first fatality during a space mission. By contrast, the U.S. was gaining ground. On the 20th of July 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, securing America's victory in this phase of the space race. Throughout the Cold War, secrecy fueled speculation. Some rumors became so widespread that they're still discussed today. The most persistent is that the Soviets sent people into space who never returned. Whispers of lost Soviet cosmonauts began early. Claims surfaced about astronauts dying during re-entry, suffering psychological collapse, or being stranded in orbit when their spacecraft failed to return. Gossip of this kind was already around when Yuri Gagarin was preparing for his pioneering journey to space, and one rumor suggested that Gagarin was not, in fact, the first individual to make it to space. Apparently, another person from the Soviet Union had achieved the feat less than a week beforehand. A British communist newspaper called The Daily Worker reported on this supposed earlier mission. Under the headline, "The First Man in Space," journalist Dennis Ogden claimed the cosmonaut was the test pilot's son of a top-ranking aircraft designer, and although he survived, his health had declined sharply. The report generated attention, but the Soviet Union denied the claims. Soon after, Gagarin was launched into space, becoming the official historic figure. Ogden himself covered the event, describing a nation wild with joy, and his earlier article faded into obscurity. Perhaps Ogden's second article was an attempt to correct his earlier claim, yet he wasn't the only one to report on the alleged earlier mission. A French journalist also wrote about it, even naming the supposed cosmonaut Vladimir Ilyushin. Ilyushin was a respected test pilot who had broken several flight records. His father designed aircraft during World War II and later held government positions, making it plausible that the younger Ilyushin could have been selected for a secret mission. According to the conspiracy, Ilyushin was launched into orbit without major issues, but his return went disastrously wrong. His craft veered off course, resulting in severe injuries. Some even claimed he was left comatose. Ogden later claimed he'd seen a photo of Ilyushin wearing cosmonaut attire from around the alleged mission period. The image has never surfaced, and Ilyushin never confirmed the story before his death in 2010. The lost cosmonaut conspiracy doesn't stop with Ilyushin. In 2001, Soviet scientist Mikhail Rudenko claimed that secret flights occurred in 1957, 1958, and 1959, all resulting in fatalities. He stated that none of the pilots' names were ever released, but his statements appeared in Pravda, a publication known for sensational headlines like "Alien and Human Skulls Found on Mars," making its reliability questionable. Logic also challenges the conspiracy. The Soviets publicly announced Gagarin's mission while it was still underway. If they wanted to hide potential failure, why risk acknowledging the flight before its safe conclusion? Later, declassified documents revealed real secrecy and internal chaos in the Soviet space program, but none supported the idea of lost cosmonauts. Many claims simply don't align with the documented record. Still, genuine tragedies occurred. In 1960, a launchpad explosion killed more than 100 people, and another future cosmonaut died in a fire. These events show the dangers of early space exploration. Rejecting the lost cosmonaut theory doesn't diminish the real human cost, but there remains no evidence proving its claims. Perhaps a definitive conclusion will never emerge.